You wake up at 3 in the morning and your heart is doing something it shouldn't be doing. It's not pain exactly, it's more like a thudding, a pressure behind your sternum that makes you sit up in bed and put your hand flat on your chest just to feel if something's wrong. You've been watching those numbers on the blood pressure cuff creep up for years, 130 over 85, then 140 over 90. Then the doctor says, "We need to talk about medication." And suddenly you're staring at a little white pill every morning, wondering how you got here. Here's what I want to tell you today. High blood pressure is not a disease, it is a symptom. It is your body screaming that something upstream has gone wrong, and that something has to do with the walls of your blood vessels losing their ability to relax, your kidneys holding on to sodium they should be releasing, and a slow, invisible fire called chronic inflammation that's been burning in your arteries for years. And here's what nobody told you. Your grandmother already knew how to fix this. Not with a pill, with food, with 9 specific foods that were on almost every American table in the 1940s and have almost completely vanished from our kitchens. These are things your great-grandmother bought at the general store, grew in her backyard, or pulled from the back of her pantry every single week. And the science, the real peer-reviewed published science, shows us exactly why they worked. I'm Dr. William, and if you're new here, this is where we reconnect food with the medicine it was always meant to be. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me what your blood pressure was the last time you checked it. I read every one of those comments and I want to know where you're starting from. Let me explain what's actually happening inside your arteries so the rest of this video makes sense. Your blood vessels are not rigid pipes. They're alive. They're lined with a one-cell thick layer called the endothelium, and that endothelium is the most underappreciated organ in your body. When it's healthy, it produces a molecule called nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is the master signal that tells the smooth muscle wrapped around your arteries to relax, to soften, to open up. When your blood vessels open, the pressure drops. Simple physics. More space, less pressure. But every time you eat a meal loaded with refined sugar, every time you sit for 8 hours, every time you're marinating in cortisol from stress, that endothelium gets damaged. It stops making nitric oxide. The vessels stiffen, the pressure goes up, and your doctor sees a number on a screen and writes a prescription. I'm not against medication. Medication saves lives. If your doctor puts you on an ACE inhibitor or a calcium channel blocker, you stay on it. What I am against is the idea that a pill is the entire answer. Because if you don't fix the endothelium, if you don't put out the inflammation, if you don't give your kidneys the minerals they need to flush sodium properly, you're just managing a number. You're not solving a problem. So let's solve the problem. The first food is beet kvass, and I realize most of you have never heard that word before, but your Eastern European ancestors survived on this. Kvass is a lacto-fermented beet drink. You take raw beets, you chop them into rough cubes, you put them in a wide-mouth mason jar with filtered water, a teaspoon of sea salt, and maybe a splash of whey or sauerkraut juice as a starter. You put a cloth over the top and you let it sit on your counter for 2 to 3 days. What comes out is this deep, almost jewel-colored ruby red liquid that tastes earthy and slightly sour and alive. In the 1940s, families from Polish, Ukrainian, and Russian backgrounds kept a jar of this going on the counter the way we keep a coffee pot going. It was never special. It was just there. But here's what the science tells us. Raw beets are one of the most concentrated natural sources of dietary nitrates. When you eat those nitrates, the bacteria on the back of your tongue convert them into nitrite, and then your stomach converts that into nitric oxide, the exact molecule your damaged endothelium stopped making. A study published in the journal Hypertension out of Queen Mary University of London showed that drinking beet juice lowered systolic blood pressure by an average of 8 points in just 24 hours. 8 points from a vegetable. But kvass does something beet juice alone can't do. Because it's fermented, it's loaded with lactobacillus bacteria that directly improve the gut microbiome. And we now know that an unhealthy gut is one of the drivers of chronic inflammation, which is one of the drivers of endothelial damage, which is one of the drivers of high blood pressure. So kvass hits 2 targets at once. Here's what I want you to do. Make a jar this weekend. 2 medium beets, cubed, not grated, because grating makes it ferment too fast and turn alcoholic. 2 tablespoons of sea salt. Fill the jar with filtered water. Cover with a cloth, not a lid, because it needs to breathe. Wait 48 to 72 hours. Drink 4 ounces every morning before breakfast. That's half a cup. You can dilute it if the flavor is too strong at first. Keep the jar in the fridge after it's done and just top it off with water and a pinch of salt every time you drink some. The same beets can go 3 or 4 rounds before you need fresh ones. The second food is sardines packed in olive oil, and I know some of you just made a face, but stay with me here. In every coastal town in America in the 1940s, sardines were the working man's lunch. They came in those little flat tins with the key you rolled back, and men would eat them on crackers or straight out of the can with a fork. They cost almost nothing. Women in fishing villages from Maine to Monterey would buy them by the case. The smell of those tins opening is a memory that a lot of people over 70 still carry. That slightly briny, oily, oceanic smell that meant lunch was simple and lunch was cheap. But those little fish are arguably the most powerful cardiovascular food on the planet. Sardines are loaded with EPA and DHA, the 2 omega-3 fatty acids that directly reduce inflammation in the arterial wall. They're one of the richest natural sources of coenzyme Q10, which your heart muscle needs to produce energy. And here's the part that blows my mind. Sardines are one of the few foods that contain significant amounts of both calcium and vitamin D together, which your kidneys need to regulate the renin-angiotensin system. That's the hormonal system that controls how much sodium your kidneys hold on to. When that system is out of balance, you retain sodium, you retain water, and your blood pressure goes up. A meta-analysis published in the American Journal of Hypertension, looking at multiple trials, found that omega-3 supplementation from marine sources reduced systolic blood pressure by an average of 4 to 5 millimeters of mercury. But here's the thing, they were studying supplements. Whole sardines give you the omega-3s, plus the minerals, plus the protein, plus the coenzyme Q10, all in one package. Eat 1 tin 3 to 4 times a week. Choose sardines packed in extra virgin olive oil, not soybean oil, not canola oil. Eat the bones. I know that sounds strange, but sardine bones are soft and they're a tremendous source of bioavailable calcium. If you can't eat them plain, mash them with a fork, add a squeeze of lemon, a little mustard, some diced red onion, and eat them on a piece of sourdough toast. The third food is potassium broth. And pay close attention here because this is the one I think is most missing from the modern diet. In the 1930s and 40s, especially during the Depression, nothing went to waste in a kitchen. The outer leaves of cabbage, the tops of celery, the peels of potatoes, the stems of parsley, onion skins, carrot tops, all of it went into a big pot of water and simmered for hours. What came out was a clear, golden, mineral-rich broth that families drank by the cup. They called it pot liquor in the South. They called it vegetable water in the Midwest. And they had no idea they were making one of the most effective natural blood pressure remedies ever documented. Here's why. The single most important mineral for blood pressure regulation is potassium, and most Americans get less than half of what they need. Potassium works in direct opposition to sodium. When your potassium levels are adequate, your kidneys release sodium efficiently. When potassium is low, sodium builds up, water follows, blood volume increases, and pressure rises. The DASH diet, which is the most studied dietary approach to hypertension in history, works primarily because it floods the body with potassium from fruits and vegetables, but our grandmothers did it more efficiently. By simmering those vegetable scraps for 3 to 4 hours, they extracted the potassium and magnesium and other minerals into the liquid in a form that's immediately absorbed by the gut. No fiber to slow it down, no digestion required. It goes straight into the bloodstream. Make a big pot every Sunday. Save your vegetable scraps during the week in a bag in the freezer. Sunday morning, dump the bag into a stock pot. Cover with water, add a teaspoon of apple cider vinegar to help extract the minerals, and simmer on low for 3 to 4 hours. Strain it. Drink 1 to 2 cups a day. Warm, with a pinch of sea salt if you want. This is not soup, this is medicine in a mug. Now, the fourth food is something that was so common in the 40s that nobody even thought of it as special, and that's raw garlic. Not garlic powder, not the pre-minced stuff in a jar. Fresh, raw, pungent, makes your eyes water garlic. Every Italian grandmother, every Jewish grandmother, every Mexican grandmother had a braid of garlic hanging somewhere in that kitchen. And they didn't just cook with it, they ate it raw, crushed into salad dressings, rubbed on toast, swallowed in pieces with water like a pill. The smell was the smell of a kitchen that was actually feeding people, not just heating up packages. And the science on garlic and blood pressure is so strong that it borders on embarrassing for the pharmaceutical industry. When you crush or chop raw garlic and let it sit for 10 minutes, an enzyme called alliinase converts a compound called alliin into allicin. Allicin is a sulfur compound that stimulates the production of hydrogen sulfide in your blood vessels, and hydrogen sulfide is a gasotransmitter, just like nitric oxide, that tells the smooth muscle in your artery walls to relax. A meta-analysis published in the Journal of Clinical Hypertension in 2015 reviewed multiple randomized controlled trials and found that garlic supplementation reduced systolic blood pressure by an average of 8 to 9 millimeters of mercury in people with hypertension. That is comparable to a first-line blood pressure medication. But here's the critical detail that most people get wrong. Cooking destroys alliinase within about 60 seconds of hitting heat. So if you throw minced garlic into a hot pan, you just killed the enzyme that makes the medicine. You have to crush it, let it sit exposed to air for at least 10 minutes so the allicin forms, and then either eat it raw or add it at the very end of cooking. My recommendation is 2 cloves per day, crushed and left to sit for 10 minutes, then either swallowed with water or stirred into food that's already off the heat. If your stomach is sensitive, take it with a meal, never on an empty stomach. The fifth food is going to surprise you, and it's one I'm especially passionate about. It's blackstrap molasses. Now, before you skip ahead, hear me out. In the 1940s, blackstrap molasses was in every pantry in rural America. It was the thick, dark, almost bitter syrup left over after sugar cane was refined into white sugar. It was what they gave white sugar's nutrition to. Think about that for a second. All the minerals that were in the original sugar cane, the iron, the calcium, the magnesium, the potassium, the chromium, they got stripped out to make white sugar pretty and sweet, and they ended up concentrated in blackstrap molasses. Families in the South and in Appalachian communities would stir a spoonful into hot water or milk every morning. Children took it as a tonic. Women took it during pregnancy. Men took it before going out to work the fields. The jar sat on the table like salt and pepper. And here's why it matters for blood pressure. 1 tablespoon of blackstrap molasses contains roughly 700 milligrams of potassium. That's more than a banana. It contains about 200 milligrams of calcium and over 40 milligrams of magnesium, which is a cofactor in over 300 enzymatic reactions in your body, including the relaxation of blood vessel walls. Research published in the journal Magnesium Research has consistently shown that magnesium supplementation reduces blood pressure, particularly in people who are deficient. And most people over 55 are deficient because modern soils are depleted and modern diets are stripped. 1 tablespoon of blackstrap molasses every morning, stirred into warm water or coffee. Not regular molasses, not cooking molasses, blackstrap specifically. Look for unsulfured blackstrap molasses from a reputable brand. It tastes strong and slightly bitter, almost like dark roasted coffee. Some people love it immediately. Some people need a week to adjust. But your blood vessels will thank you from day 1. The 6th food, and this is the one I think the fewest people know about, is celery seed. Not celery stalks, although those are wonderful. Celery seed. In traditional Chinese medicine, celery has been used to treat high blood pressure for centuries, but it wasn't until researchers at the University of Chicago in the late 1990s isolated a compound called 3N-butylphthalide, or NBP, that we understood why. NBP relaxes the smooth muscle in arterial walls by a different mechanism than nitric oxide. It works on calcium channels in the muscle cells, essentially doing what a calcium channel blocker medication does, but gently and without the side effects of swollen ankles and dizziness. And celery seed has the highest concentration of NBP of any part of the celery plant. It's about 60 times more concentrated than the stalk. In the 40s, celery seed was a common spice in American kitchens. Women used it in potato salad, in coleslaw dressing, in soups, in pickles. It has this warm, slightly bitter, slightly peppery flavor that people used to describe as earthy. There's a study from the journal Natural Medicine Journal that documented a proprietary celery seed extract reducing systolic blood pressure by an average of 8 points and diastolic by 3 points over 6 weeks. But you don't need a proprietary extract. A quarter teaspoon of ground celery seed per day, sprinkled on food, stirred into a dressing, or steeped in hot water as a tea, gives you a meaningful dose of NBP. Start with that and work up to half a teaspoon over a couple of weeks. One warning: celery seed can increase sensitivity to sunlight in some people and should be avoided during pregnancy. And if you're on a blood pressure medication already, talk to your doctor before adding this because it can enhance the effect of the drug. I want you to pay special attention to number 7 because this one connects directly to something your doctor may have never mentioned to you. The 7th food is bone broth, real bone broth, made the way your great-grandmother made it, not the stuff in the box on the grocery store shelf. I'm talking about taking beef marrow bones, or chicken carcasses, or pork neck bones, putting them in the biggest pot you own with a splash of apple cider vinegar, covering them with cold water, and simmering for 12 to 24 hours until the liquid is so rich with gelatin that when you put it in the fridge it jiggles like Jell-O. In the 40s, this wasn't a recipe. This was just how people cooked. You never threw away bones. Those bones were the second meal, sometimes the more valuable meal. The kitchen smelled like rich, savory, deep umami for a full day. The broth had beautiful golden circles of fat on the surface that caught the light when you ladled it into a bowl. Here's the science. That gelatin breaks down into amino acids, primarily glycine and proline. Glycine reduces blood pressure by calming the sympathetic nervous system, the fight-or-flight system that keeps your blood vessels clenched tight. A study published in Frontiers in Molecular Biosciences documented glycine's role as an inhibitory neurotransmitter that promotes vascular relaxation. But there's more. The collagen in bone broth supports the structural integrity of your blood vessel walls. Your arteries are made of collagen. When collagen degrades, arteries stiffen, a condition called arteriosclerosis, and that stiffening is one of the primary causes of isolated systolic hypertension in people over 60. You're giving your arteries the raw materials they need to rebuild. Drink 1 to 2 cups per day, make a big batch on Sunday, portion it into mason jars, and reheat a cup every morning. If you buy it, find a brand that gels when refrigerated. If it doesn't gel, it doesn't have enough collagen. The 8th food is something so simple it almost feels ridiculous to include, but the data is too strong to leave it out. It's raw apple cider vinegar. In the 1940s, a jar of apple cider vinegar was as common in a farmhouse as a salt shaker. Families used it in salad dressings, marinades, pickling, preserving, and as a daily tonic mixed with water and a little honey. The vinegar was different then because it was raw and unpasteurized, made from whole apples fermented in wooden barrels. You could see the mother culture floating in the jar, that murky, cobwebby strand of acetic acid bacteria and cellulose. The mechanism is fascinating. Acetic acid, the primary active compound, activates an enzyme called AMPK in your cells, sometimes called the master metabolic switch. When activated, it improves insulin sensitivity and stimulates nitric oxide production in the endothelium. There's also a direct effect on the renin-angiotensin system. Animal studies published in Bioscience, Biotechnology, and Biochemistry showed that acetic acid reduced blood pressure by inhibiting renin, the enzyme that starts the cascade of sodium and water retention. In my experience, people who take apple cider vinegar consistently report lower fasting blood pressure readings within 3 to 4 weeks. 1 tablespoon in a glass of water, first thing in the morning, before breakfast. Always dilute it. Use a straw for tooth enamel protection, and make sure you're buying raw, unfiltered apple cider vinegar with the mother. If the bottle is perfectly clear, it's been pasteurized and you've lost most of the benefit. And now we come to number 9, the last one on this list, and it might be the most important because it addresses something none of the other 8 can fully fix on their own. The ninth food is cod liver oil. In the 40s, cod liver oil was given to almost every child in America. Teachers lined kids up in school and gave them a spoonful. Mothers kept a bottle on the kitchen counter. It was not optional. It was considered as fundamental as brushing your teeth. Then, somewhere in the 60s and 70s, we stopped. We replaced it with synthetic multivitamins. That was a catastrophic mistake. Cod liver oil is the single best food source of vitamin D, retinol, which is the active form of vitamin A, and omega-3 fatty acids, all in one spoonful. And the connection between vitamin D deficiency and high blood pressure is one of the most robust findings in cardiovascular research. A landmark study published in The Lancet Diabetes and Endocrinology, involving over 100,000 participants, found that genetically low vitamin D levels were associated with significantly higher blood pressure. The mechanism is direct. Vitamin D suppresses the production of renin. When your vitamin D is low, your kidneys make more renin, you hold on to more sodium and water, and your blood pressure goes up. Meanwhile, the retinol supports endothelial cell health, and the omega-3s reduce inflammation. 1 teaspoon per day, taken with a meal that contains fat. Look for brands that are third-party tested for heavy metals. If you can't tolerate the taste, capsules are fine, but the liquid is absorbed faster. Take it with breakfast, with eggs, with anything that has fat in it. Now let me tell you about a man named Gerald. Gerald was 68 years old, a retired mail carrier from Dayton, Ohio. Gerald had been on lisinopril for 7 years. His blood pressure was controlled at around 138/86, which his doctor said was acceptable for his age. But Gerald didn't feel acceptable. He was tired all the time. He had a persistent dry cough from the medication, which is one of the most common side effects of ACE inhibitors. His ankles were puffy by the end of the day, and every morning he'd sit on the edge of the bed for a minute before standing up because he was dizzy if he got up too fast. Gerald's daughter sent him one of my videos. He was skeptical. His exact words to me later were, "I thought it was going to be some snake oil nonsense." But he started with the simplest things. He made potassium broth every Sunday. He ate sardines twice a week. He stirred blackstrap molasses into his morning coffee. He crushed 2 cloves of garlic every evening and swallowed them with water after dinner. He layered in 1 thing per week over 6 weeks. After 8 weeks, his home readings were averaging 124/78. His doctor noticed, and they reduced his lisinopril dose by half. After another 3 months, his average was 118/74, and his doctor took him off the medication entirely. Gerald still checks his blood pressure every morning. He still sees his doctor every 3 months. But the cough is gone. The dizziness is gone. The ankle swelling is gone. And every Sunday morning, his kitchen smells like simmering vegetable broth and bone stock. He told me, "My kitchen smells like my mother's kitchen used to smell, and I didn't even realize I missed that until it came back." Gerald's story isn't magic, it's biology. He gave his endothelium the nitric oxide precursors it needed. He gave his kidneys the potassium and vitamin D they needed to stop hoarding sodium. He put out the inflammatory fire with omega-3s and glycine, and his body did what bodies are designed to do when you give them the right inputs. It healed. Before I wrap up, I need to say something important, and I need you to take this seriously. If you are currently on blood pressure medication, do not stop taking it because of this video. Do not reduce your dose on your own. Several of the foods I just described, particularly the garlic, the celery seed, and the cod liver oil, can enhance the effects of blood pressure medications. That means if you add these foods while taking your full dose of medication, your blood pressure could drop too low, and that's dangerous. The right approach is to start incorporating these foods. Monitor your blood pressure at home twice a day for 2 to 3 weeks. Bring your log to your doctor and let your doctor decide if and when to adjust your medication. This is a partnership, your food and your doctor working together, never one against the other. So here's the big picture, and I want you to carry this with you. Every single one of these 9 foods does one or more of 4 things. They restore nitric oxide production so your arteries can relax. They flood your body with potassium and magnesium so your kidneys can release sodium. They reduce the chronic inflammation that's been silently shredding your endothelium for years. Or they provide the raw structural materials, the collagen, the glycine, the retinol that your blood vessels need to physically rebuild themselves. That's not 9 random foods. That's a coordinated repair strategy using the exact ingredients your great grandmother had in her kitchen in 1943. The answer was never in the pharmacy. The answer was in the pantry. The pharmacy is what you need when the pantry fails. So don't let the pantry fail. Here's your action plan for this week. Step 1. Go to the store today and buy raw beets, a tin of sardines in olive oil, a head of garlic, and a bottle of blackstrap molasses. Step 2. Tomorrow morning, crush 2 cloves of garlic, let them sit 10 minutes, and swallow them with water. Stir a tablespoon of blackstrap molasses into your coffee or warm water. Step 3. This weekend, make your first jar of beet kvass and your first pot of potassium broth. Step 4. Order a bottle of cod liver oil and a jar of celery seed this week so they're ready when you start week 2. Step 5. Start a blood pressure log. Check your numbers every morning before breakfast and every evening before dinner. Write them down. In 3 weeks, you're going to have data, real data, to show your doctor. Now, in my next video, I'm going to tackle something that's directly connected to everything we talked about today, and it's the one mineral deficiency that affects over 68% of adults over 55, and that almost no doctor tests for. When this mineral is low, your blood vessels can't relax no matter how much nitric oxide you produce, your heart rhythm becomes erratic, and your blood pressure becomes resistant to medication. If you've ever been told your blood pressure is hard to control, or we might need to add a second medication, this mineral is very likely the missing piece. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss that one. I'll see you there.